What happens when two music industry powerhouses clash over creative integrity and the future of country music? Today we're diving into the explosive confrontation between Blake Shelton and Jennifer Hudson that left everyone in the studio speechless. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused this heated exchange, because what you're about to hear will shock you. It all started when Blake Shelton appeared as a guest on the Jennifer Hudson show to promote his latest album. What seemed like a routine interview quickly turned into something much more intense. Jennifer Hudson, known for her powerhouse vocals and no-nonsense approach, had done her homework on Blake's recent career moves, and she wasn't about to let certain things slide. "Blake, welcome to the show," Jennifer said, flashing her signature smile as the audience applauded. "I have to say, your new album has been getting mixed reviews. Some critics are saying you've lost touch with your country roots." Blake shifted in his chair, his usual easygoing demeanor already showing signs of tension. "Well, Jennifer, critics have been saying that about me for years. I make music that feels authentic to me, and my fans seem to appreciate it. But that's just it." Jennifer leaned forward, her tone becoming more pointed. "When you say authentic, what does that mean, exactly? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been chasing trends rather than setting them." The studio audience grew quiet, sensing the shift in energy. Blake's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I think that's a pretty bold statement coming from someone who jumped from American Idol to Broadway to movies. Aren't we all just following opportunities?" Jennifer's eyebrows raised, and there was a flash of something sharp in her eyes. "The difference is, I've never compromised my artistic vision to fit into a box that wasn't meant for me. Can you say the same?" "What exactly are you implying?" Blake asked, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Your last 3 singles have been criticized for appropriating hip-hop elements without acknowledging the culture they come from. Meanwhile, you've been pretty vocal about keeping country music traditional. Don't you see the contradiction there?" Blake ran his hand through his hair, clearly becoming agitated. "Look, music evolves. Country music has always borrowed from other genres. That's how art works. But there's a difference between evolution and exploitation." Jennifer shot back without missing a beat. "When you use elements from black culture to make your music more marketable, then turn around and talk about preserving the integrity of country music, what message does that send?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Camera operators adjusted their angles, and the producer could be seen making hand gestures from the wings. Blake's face was reddening, and his usual charm was nowhere to be found. "I think you're way out of line here, Jennifer. I've never exploited anyone or anything. I make music that I believe in, and I've always been respectful of the artists who inspire me." Jennifer wasn't backing down. "Respectful, really? Because I don't recall hearing you give credit to the black artists whose sound you borrowed for your last album. In fact, in your recent interview with Country Music Today, you specifically said that modern country needed to get back to its pure roots. How do you reconcile that?" Blake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who doesn't understand the country music industry." "Sit back down, Blake," Jennifer said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who wasn't intimidated. "We're not done here." "Actually, we are," Blake replied, his voice rising. "This isn't an interview anymore, it's an ambush." The audience was completely silent now, watching this confrontation unfold in real time. Jennifer remained seated, but her posture was straight and unyielding. "An ambush? I'm asking you legitimate questions about your music and your statements. If you can't handle that, then maybe you're not as confident in your artistic choices as you claim to be." Blake's face was now visibly flushed with anger. "You know what, Jennifer? I came here as a courtesy, to promote my album and have a friendly conversation. I didn't sign up to be attacked by someone who thinks she knows everything about country music because she won a few singing competitions." The insult hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Jennifer's expression darkened, and when she spoke, her voice was ice cold. "A few singing competitions." Jennifer's voice was deadly quiet, but it carried across the silent studio like a blade. "Let me educate you about something, Blake. I won an Oscar, a Grammy, and 2 Golden Globes before you even knew my name. But more importantly, I've never had to steal from other cultures to make my music relevant." Blake took a step back, clearly not expecting Jennifer to fire back with such precision. "I never stole anything from anyone." "Really? Let's talk about your song Backroad Bounce from last year. The beat, the vocal runs, even the way you structured the chorus, all borrowed heavily from trap music. But when Rolling Stone asked you about influences for that album, you mentioned Hank Williams and George Strait. Convenient how you forgot to mention Future or Travis Scott." "That's completely different," Blake said, his voice getting louder. "Country music has always incorporated different sounds." "Has it though?" Jennifer stood up now, matching his energy. "Or have white artists in country music always felt entitled to take what they want from black culture, while simultaneously excluding black artists from the genre?" Because let's be honest about country music's history with diversity. Blake's hands were clenched at his sides. You're twisting everything I've done into something it's not. I've supported black artists my whole career. Name 3 black country artists you've collaborated with in the last 5 years. The question hit like a lightning bolt. Blake opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly scrambling for an answer. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I thought so, Jennifer continued. You've had opportunities to lift up black voices in country music. But instead you've chosen to lift up their sound without lifting up their stories or their struggles. That's not fair, Blake finally managed. The music industry is complicated. It's not as simple as just choosing who to work with, isn't it? You've worked with plenty of pop artists, rock artists, even electronic music producers. But somehow, when it comes to black country artists, the industry gets too complicated. Blake was pacing now, clearly agitated. You're putting words in my mouth. I never said anything about race being a factor in my collaborations. You don't have to say it, Blake. Your actions speak loud enough. And what's worse is that you've built a platform on The Voice where you could have championed diverse country artists. But instead, you've consistently pushed the same cookie-cutter sound. Now you're attacking my coaching. Blake's voice cracked. With indignation, I've helped launch dozens of careers on that show. Have you? Or have you molded artists into versions of what you think country music should sound like? Because I've noticed a pattern in your team picks, Blake. They all seem to fit a very specific demographic. The accusation was devastating, and Blake knew it. His face went from red to pale in an instant. That's a serious accusation. Jennifer, you're basically calling me a racist. I'm not calling you anything. I'm pointing out patterns in your behavior and asking you to explain them. If you're interpreting that as an attack on your character, maybe you should examine why. Blake pointed a finger at Jennifer, his composure completely gone now. You have no right to sit there and judge my career or my choices. You don't know what it's like to work in country music. You're right, I don't work in country music regularly, but I work in an industry where I've had to fight for every opportunity, where I've been told I'm too black, too gospel, to this, to that, and I've watched white artists take elements from my culture and get praised for innovation, while artists who look like me get ignored. This isn't about you, Jennifer, isn't it? This is about all of us, Blake. This is about an industry that profits off black creativity while marginalizing black artists. And when someone like you, with your platform and influence, perpetuates that system, it affects everyone. Blake shook his head violently. I'm not perpetuating anything. I'm just making music. Just making music, Jennifer repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. Blake, do you hear yourself? You're one of the most powerful people in country music. You judge aspiring artists on national television. You influence what gets played. On country radio, you have the ear of record executives and industry decision makers. Nothing you do is just anything. I didn't ask for that responsibility, but you have it whether you asked for it or not. And what you've chosen to do with it speaks volumes about who you are as an artist and as a person. Blake was breathing heavily now, his chest rising and falling as he struggled to maintain control. You know what, Jennifer? I came here to talk about my music, not to be lectured about social justice by someone who's never walked in my shoes. And I've never asked you to walk in mine, but I am asking you to acknowledge that your shoes have taken you down paths that mine never could. That's called privilege, Blake, and pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make it go away. Privilege, Blake's voice exploded across the studio. You want to talk about privilege? You've been handed opportunities your entire career because of who you are, not what you've accomplished. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The audience gasped audibly, and even the camera operators seemed to freeze. Jennifer's face went completely still, her eyes narrowing to laser focus. Excuse me, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout could have. Blake realized immediately that he had crossed a line, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. I'm just saying that maybe we should talk about all kinds of privilege, not just the kind you want to focus on. Blake, I want you to be very careful about what you say next, because this conversation is being recorded and broadcast to millions of people. Are you seriously suggesting that I've gotten where I am because of affirmative action or diversity quotas? I'm suggesting that maybe your perspective on the music industry is colored by your own experiences, just like mine is. Jennifer stood up slowly, and there was something absolutely terrifying about her calm demeanor. My perspective is colored by having to be twice as good to get half the recognition. My perspective is colored by being told I was too urban for pop music and too pop for R&B. My perspective is colored by winning an Oscar for my first movie role and still having people question whether I deserved it. Blake shifted uncomfortably, but Jennifer wasn't finished. You want to know what real privilege looks like, Blake? Real privilege is being able to appropriate sounds from marginalized communities and call it evolution. Real privilege is being able to sit on a television show and judge other people's talent while never having your own talent questioned because of the color of your skin. That's not fair, Blake protested weakly. Fair. Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that Mickey Guyton, one of the most talented country artists of this generation, had to fight for years to get the recognition she deserved? Is it fair that Kane Brown had to prove himself twice as hard because he didn't fit the traditional country image? Those are different situations, are they? Or are they part of the same system that you benefit from every single day? The same system that allows you to borrow from black culture when it's convenient and distance yourself from it when it's not. Blake ran his hands through his hair, his frustration boiling over. You're making this about race when it's about music. It's always been about music for me. Blake, music doesn't exist in a vacuum. When you make choices about what sounds to use, what artists to work with, what messages to promote, you're making cultural and political statements whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So now, I'm supposed to consider the cultural implications of every chord progression and every drum beat. You're supposed to consider the impact of your choices. Yes, especially when those choices affect other people's livelihoods and opportunities. Blake threw his hands up in exasperation. This is insane. I can't make music while worrying about every possible interpretation of every creative decision. Nobody's asking you to overthink your creativity, Blake. We're asking you to think about your responsibility. There's a difference. Responsibility. To who? To critics who are never satisfied no matter what I do. Responsibility to the communities whose culture you're borrowing from. Responsibility to the artists who don't have your platform. Responsibility to the kids who look up to you and think that success means taking what you want without giving credit where it's due. Blake's face was red again, his anger reaching a fever pitch. I don't owe anyone anything beyond making good music and entertaining my fans. And there it is, Jennifer said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. That's exactly the attitude that perpetuates these problems. The idea that success gives you the right to take without giving back. I give back plenty. I do charity work, I mentor young artists, I support causes I believe in. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you do charity work for causes that make you look good. You mentor artists who remind you of yourself, and you support causes that don't challenge your worldview. Blake pointed at Jennifer, his voice shaking with rage. You don't know anything about me or what I do behind the scenes. Then tell me, Blake, tell me about the black country artists you've quietly supported. Tell me about the conversations you've had with industry executives about diversity. Tell me about the times you've used your influence to challenge the status quo. Instead of reinforcing it, the silence that followed was deafening. Blake's mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak, but no words came out. The truth was written all over his face. That's what I thought, Jennifer said softly. And that's the real problem, Blake. It's not that you're actively trying to hurt anyone. It's that you're passively allowing a harmful system to continue because it benefits you. I'm done with this, Blake said, his voice breaking slightly. This isn't an interview, it's a witch hunt. It's accountability, Blake, something you've clearly never had to face before. Blake's hands were shaking now, his carefully constructed public persona crumbling in real time. Accountability. You're trying to destroy my career because I don't fit into your political agenda. Blake, your career is built on foundations that exclude and exploit others. If examining that threatens you, maybe the problem isn't with the examination. You know what? Blake's voice was getting higher, more desperate. Maybe country music doesn't need to change. Maybe it's fine the way it is. Maybe not everything needs to be about diversity and inclusion and all these buzzwords that don't actually mean anything. The studio went dead silent. Even the crew members stopped moving. Jennifer stared at Blake with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Buzzwords, she repeated slowly. You think equality is a buzzword. I think people use these terms to shut down conversations and make others feel guilty for being successful. Blake, listen to yourself. You're literally proving every point I've made tonight. When faced with legitimate criticism about exclusion and appropriation, your response is to double down and suggest that maybe exclusion is actually fine. Blake was pacing again, but now his movements were erratic, almost frantic. I'm not excluding anyone. If people are talented enough, they'll make it. That's how the industry works. Is it? Is that really how you think it works? Because I can name dozens of incredibly talented black country artists who couldn't get radio play. Couldn't get record deals, couldn't get the opportunities that you've been handed your entire career. Handed to me. Blake spun around to face her. I worked for everything I have. I came from nothing, played in dive bars, struggled for years before anyone knew my name. And I'm not diminishing your work ethic, Blake. But the difference is that when you walked into those record label offices, when you sent in those demos, when you performed at those showcases, people could immediately picture you as a country star. Can you say the same would have been true if you were black? Blake's jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. That's hypothetical. We'll never know. It's not hypothetical for the artists who've lived it. It's not hypothetical for Charlie Pride, who had to hide his race on early radio singles. It's not hypothetical for Mickey Guyton, who was told to make her music less country so she could fit into the urban market instead. Those are isolated incidents. Isolated. Jennifer's voice rose for the first time. Blake, you cannot be this naive. These aren't isolated incidents. They're systematic patterns that have shaped the entire genre. Blake stopped pacing and turned to face the audience, as if appealing to them directly. I think most people understand that I'm just trying to make good music. I'm not trying to hurt anyone or keep anyone out of anything. Blake, turn around and look at me, Jennifer commanded. Don't appeal to the audience. Don't try to find validation from people who weren't part of this conversation. Answer me directly. Reluctantly, Blake turned back to face her. His face was flushed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the studio's air conditioning. Do you not believe that your success has been influenced by systemic advantages that aren't available to everyone? I think we all have advantages and disadvantages. That's not what I asked. I asked specifically about systemic advantages based on race. Blake's silence stretched on for nearly 30 seconds. The tension was suffocating. Answer the question. Blake, I don't think about things that way. That's exactly the problem. You have the luxury of not thinking about it because it doesn't affect you negatively. But your refusal to think about it perpetuates a system that does affect others negatively. Blake suddenly exploded. You know what, Jennifer? I didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed by someone who thinks they have all the answers. You want to tear down everything I've built because it doesn't meet your standards of political correctness. Political correctness. Jennifer stood up, her composure finally cracking. Blake, we're talking about basic human decency and recognition of other people's contributions to the culture you profit from. I'm done with this, Blake said, backing toward the edge of the interview area. This whole thing has been a setup from the beginning. It's been questions, Blake, just questions. If you can't handle questions about your career and your choices, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Blake ripped off his microphone and threw it on the chair. Maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't be here trying to have a reasonable conversation with someone who's already made up their mind about who I am. I haven't made up my mind about anything. I've asked you direct questions and you've refused to give direct answers. Your evasion is more telling than any answer could have been. Whatever, Jennifer. Enjoy your ratings boost from this ambush. Blake started walking toward the exit. Blake, Jennifer called after him, her voice now deadly calm. When you get home tonight and you're trying to justify what happened here, remember this, I didn't ambush you. I just asked you to be honest about things you've never had to be honest about before. Blake stopped at the edge of the stage, his back still to Jennifer and the audience. For a moment, it seemed like he might turn around, might try to salvage something from this disaster. Instead, he shook his head and walked off, leaving Jennifer standing alone on the stage. Jennifer turned to face the audience, who had sat in stunned silence through the entire confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, that was supposed to be a conversation about music and artistry. Instead, it became something much more important. A big conversation about responsibility, accountability, and what we owe each other as artists and as human beings. The audience remained silent, still processing what they had just witnessed. Thank you for being here tonight, Jennifer continued, and I hope this conversation, difficult as it was, opens up bigger conversations about how we can build a more inclusive and equitable music industry for everyone. What do you think really drove Blake Shelton to storm off that stage? Was it genuine anger,